This is the content. Today we are going to talk about overview of attendance and payroll integration. And secondly, we are talking about what is ISUP and how to use it. And third, we are talking about what is the data interchange. And mainly today, we are focusing about the practical configuration session. I think Yasanta ready for the next part. Yasanta?
Yes, Avanta. As you mentioned, today we are going to focus about attendance integration with the payroll systems. Before we start into the practical configuration side of it, it is essential that we can get a very basic idea of what we are trying to achieve today. So in terms of when it comes to the attendance and payroll integration, there are many ways that we can do an integration. So let's quickly look at the options that are available in integration with the payroll system. So as you can see in this diagram, we have a Hikvision device here in the diagram. So this device can be a face recognition device, can be a card-based device, or can be even a fingerprint, or can we have multiple authentication options in the device. So from normally what will happen is these devices can be added to our software, which most commonly used software is IVMS 4200. Also, we have Hikcentrol, and recently we released Hikcentrol Access Control. And also we have certain middleware that we are using for this kind of integration, especially device access gateway, as well as we have a SaaS solution, which is Hik Pro Connect. So you can pick any of these software solutions and simply add the device to the software. And from that software, there are various options that you can use to connect to the third-party payroll system. One way is the API. Otherwise, we call it application programming interface. So simply you can have certain API requests coming into our software and fetching the relevant required data. Mostly it will be the attendance in and out records. As well as these APIs can work two ways. So for example, if you want to push your employee data into our system, you can also do that. So it is going into some deep level of integration. If you are a payroll company who want to integrate your product, you might have a cloud solution or a payroll software. You want to integrate that with Hikvision devices to capture the attendance statistics. You can use this kind of a deep level integration. If you are just a company, or even if you are a payroll company, that's fine. If you want to have more simple manner of connecting and getting the attendance data, you have the database transfer option. In that, we are able to transfer all the attendance data into a database table automatically when you do the configuration. As well as you are able to receive those data as a CSV or text file. So simply you take those files into your process and you upload into your system. That is a one part. There is another part that you can follow, which is if you don't want to have any sort of middleware, any sort of Hikvision software in your way, you can simply talk to the device using API or system development kit. And for that, you might have to do certain customizations into your software, but it is also one way that we can follow. So these are the available options that you can integrate Hikvision devices with various possible methods. So next slide, we are going to have a little bit deep dive into this, where you can see we have created 5 layers here: device layer, platform layer, cloud layer, time and attendance system, as well as application layer. So you can see payroll software, the ERP system sits at the application layer. So our objective is to capture the user attendance data and transfer all the way up to the payroll system. As well as sometimes we can also manage the user enrollment, the entire employee life cycle also using the third-party software. That is possible. So one way is doing of this is directly communicating with the device using an API. We have a special API called ISAPI, otherwise denoted as Intelligent Secure Application Programming Interface. So what you can do is simply use certain customization into your software to communicate with this API, and you can directly communicate to upload the employee credentials, upload the employee biometric data, then receive their attendance data back to your system. That is one way. And here, the only requirement is that the device should be network reachable. So if you are doing it in LAN or a VPN, you should have the reachability from your software to the device. If you are doing it over the internet, you might have to set up certain mechanisms such as dynamic DNS or static IP systems, so and so forth. So that is again in a little bit complicated way, but you can also use one of our platforms, which is in the middle. You can see we have Hikcentrol Professional. Also, we have another software which we recently released, which is Hikcentrol Access Control. Also, if it is not a very complicated deployment, you can use our IMS 4200 as well. And simply From there, you transfer data into the third-party system. Again, we have API for Hikcentral and Hikcentral access control and database transfer option, and also CSV text file dump. Also, if you want to use some sort of a cloud-based solution or a SaaS product, we have our HikPro Connect solution. You simply add the device to the HikPro Connect. From the HikPro Connect, you have an open API. That is, keep in mind, we don't have the database or CSV text file dump option in the cloud solution. So from the API, you directly communicate to your payroll software. So out of these, today we are going to mainly focus on this middle part. In this middle part, you can have one of our middleware, then program the database transfer to your third-party database table. From there, the payroll system picks up and do the necessary process. And the person management is done through the platform layer, platform software. So you will use the platform to upload the employees, register their biometric data. To capture their attendance, you will use the third-party database transfer. That is the practical session context for today's training. But if you want any in detail trainings on other areas as well, we are happy to arrange those trainings for you. Just mention we have a training feedback form which we will share in the later stage of this training. So in the training feedback form, you can give your feedback so we can organize those training in upcoming trainings. I mentioned that if you're directly connecting to the device through the API, there's a requirement the device should be network reachable. But here on the platform layer and the cloud layer, that is not the case. Sometimes you can simply connect the device into the internet, and over the internet, you can access to our platform software as well as the cloud software. Especially cloud software, only you need the internet connection. Also, doesn't prevent if you have a VPN setup or any sort of static IP setup, you can still connect using that as well. But today's focus, again, we are going to focus on how to connect a device to our platform software using internet without having any other static IP, DDNS or any kind of a system. Directly connect it to platform software, and from there connect it to the payroll software. So that is the overview of today's training. And with that, Taridu, I think the major mechanism that we are going to showcase today is the ISUP, which we can use to connect devices to our software using internet without having any other infrastructure requirements. So can you give us a quick rundown about this, please?
Sure. So basically, there is mainly two parts. One is end device in shown as here. This is a Minmo device, or you can use any fingerprint device or like that from Hikvision device. And other part is our management software. This may be Hikcentral or IVMS or any our newly introduced system, Hikcentral access control as a cloud service or anything like that server part. So in this Minmo end device connected through the ISUP through the internet, and those connection going to the server. This is main requirement is this our Hikvision server used as a middleware. It must have the static IP, because from end device in here example is Minmo. In Minmo device need to configure a static IP of server. That's how this both end connection communicating each other, or using in normal router or any ISP provider router, or in corporate section, we need to use port forwarding or open ports in firewall. Those details we will show you in practical training. So after that middle part, you see here, we can configure to send data to transfer third-party software. It's maybe API or database transfer or CSV dump or text dump. We can configure like that. This one of this type. We will move to next slide. In this slide, we are showing how our devices specially highlighted details. One is we using ISUP 5.0. This can use multiple location to collect time attendance details. If you, let's get example, main office in Colombo, and we need to collect time attendance details in 4 locations around our Sri Lanka. So we can just use one fingerprint device and internet connected router, or internet connection or Wi-Fi dongle, anything like that. We do not require a static IP for the fingerprint side. We just need the normal internet connection. Then we can connect these fingerprint device or Minmo devices to server in main office through the internet. But the requirement is main office required static IP to connect this device. That is main requirement. I have few highlighted points. One is built-in redundancy at device level and the software level. This is device level mean all attendance record, thumb records, recorded in device side, and after device send those details to server, then server you acknowledge to the device, server side receive those details. If anything, if anytime, let's say internet connection drop or connection interrupted, in that time, fingerprint device or Minmo end device collect all details in their device memory. This is the point we highlighted. This is depend on the hardware and software model, because some fingerprint device has more less memory and some devices has more memory. This is based on the device model. So you can check it in the data sheet. And also another thing is, this is very easy to implement. As I said, we can connect through this over the internet. Just wanted internet, no other special requirement for this. And also we don't need any DDNS account or port forwarding for the end device side. That's mean a fingerprint device side. So this is very easy. Yasanta, we need to anything add for this?
No, I think Tarindu, we have given a very clear explanation, and with that, I think we can move on to the other slides.
What is data interchange? Varuna will explain.
Sure. First, let's see what is data interchange means. Basically, what data interchange means is communicating information through an electronic media. So let's go ahead and see how we can apply to transfer our attendance records with this data interchange. Here, you must have remembered at the earlier stage of this presentation, both Yasanta and Tarindu have mentioned that you can transfer attendance records to a third-party database through our HikCentral software. Actually, here you can see a screenshot of our HikCentral software, and here mentioning the database types, you can see PostgreSQL, SQL Server, MySQL, Oracle. So likewise, our HikCentral software support all these popular database types. And when you are going from up to bottom of the screenshot, in up you can enable or disable the data interchange, and below table you can get an information about the name, resource type, and area that is configured. And in the bottom you can see informations that we should include for the server identification side, like server IP address, server port, database name, username, and password. So here you can input server information to these respective fields. So let's go ahead to the next slide and see what else more we have for the data interchange. Okay, in this table you can see on the left column we have indicated fields of the HikCentral professional: employee ID, exit date and time, device name. Likewise, in the middle column you can see the third party database field. So for this respective field, actually you can rename the field for your third party database and enter the name that you are required in the third party database. And also, considering the left side column, we can change the time format and date format, as well as we can have an idea about the direction, whether entrance or exit, and temperature status, whether it should be normal, exceptional, unknown. If it is a fingerprint device, we can't get a temperature measurement. If we are using a Minmo with a temperature screening capability, we actually can get a temperature status of the people as well. Lastly, we can get an idea about wearing the mask or not. For that also, you should definitely have a face recognition device.
In the practical session, Avanta, I have the support of Tarindu, and I will start by sharing a quick architecture diagram of today's practical. So as you can see on the screen, we have two devices with us. I have one device with me, which is a face recognition terminal with a card and fingerprint access control. And Tarindu have another device, a special device with face recognition terminal with temperature screen. What we are going to showcase today is, now we have connected these two devices to internet, how we are going to enable the database attendance data transfer to a server at AWS. And from there, AWS, we have another instance that we have installed SQL server, and how we can transfer data into the SQL server. And once you have the data in the SQL server, you can pull that data from your payroll system and do the payroll calculation. So this is one way of doing the integration. And this is, I have to say, one of the most commonly used way of doing the HR integration. So here in the workflow, the attendance data will be automatically coming into the SQL server. As Varuna mentioned, we have another 3 types of database that you can use, which is PostgreSQL, Oracle, and MySQL. So if you have the freedom to select whatever type of database, and also the instance or the server that you are running the management software or the middleware, you can also install the database in the same server. that is also an option. To manage the employees, we will use our management software interface to insert, edit, and delete the employees, and to synchronize those employees with the data in the devices. Once the users are enrolled in the devices, whenever they take authentication or mark their attendance, those transaction data will immediately be pushed in all the way up to the database. So that is the goal of today's practical today. So for support me in the practical, I have a AWS account with me, and I'm going to simply open a new instance with Windows Server 2019. And so there, in terms of server spec, whether you are deploying this on a on-premises system, or you are just trying to deploy it on your laptop, or even cloud space, we have certain specifications which we have mentioned on the data sheet. So you can refer to the data sheet and see the specification. But for today's demonstration, I'll be using just a small scale server, and I'm assigning a public IP for this server. That is the initial requirement for these connections to be established. Only the server should have a public static IP, and port forwarding should be done if you are using it through a router. But since I'm using cloud service, I have to configure a security group to enable those ports. So I will be doing that in a while. So today I have selected HCS, Hik Central Access Control, HCAC software, which is more suitable for this kind of project. You can also use IVMS 4200 and Hik Central. Doesn't matter, IVMS 4200, however, we don't recommend for a enterprise scale project because it is a standalone software. You just simply install on one computer and you can still have these functionalities. And database is not only supported in MS SQL and MySQL for IVMS 400. So if you want Oracle or PostgreSQL, you have to select either Hik Central Access Control or Hik Central Professional. So I'm going to today select Hik Central Access Control, which is more suitable for this kind of a deployment. And I have already created a security group to allow the necessary ports. So if you are setting up again in a local on-premises setup, you have to port forward these ports, which we will look into in detail, the explanations why these ports need to be allowed. So if you are using it on a VPN or a corporate environment, the firewall and the security rules in the local environment should be also applicable for the server to have incoming connections in these ports. So I will simply launch the server. While it's getting deployed, I will show you our SQL Express server settings. So I'm going to simply connect to this SQLS server. Through remote desktop connection. And for today's demonstration, we are using SQL Express, but you can use any sort of SQL variant, SQL developer version or SQL, even SQL fully fledged SQL license version is okay. So first thing I have done is we all know that in the SQL server, we need to enable this for the outside communication. I will go back to the diagram and explain this a little bit again. So here in the diagram, you can see the instance that we are going to install, the Hik Central Access Control, which is our management software, will send the data to the SQL Server instance. So this SQL Server instance should accept these data. To accept the data, there is a designated port. So we can check this instance and its security settings, and you can see the port 1433, which is a default port for MS SQL, which we have added as the security rule to enable traffic. That is not sufficient. We have to do certain things. Make sure when you are installing the SQL Server instance to enable dual authentication. So normally when we set up a MS SQL Server, it will ask us to authenticate using the Windows username and password, but that is not sufficient for this case because we need to access the server through database through network, and we need the network username and password for that. So you can use the mixed authentication mode for that. And also you have to install the SQL Server Management Studio, which is another tool that we can use to handle this. Certain permissions to be enabled. So first thing I will do is I will show you the firewall settings. So what I've done is I have created a firewall incoming rule for that database port in the Windows server as well. So if you are doing the setup, you have to do the same setup. So I have added a rule here called SQL server. Go and check the ports. We can see 1433 is enabled. So first thing you have to do is enabling the firewall rule. Then you can go to the SQL Server Management Studio, and from there you can check, we search for it. Also, another thing you can do is you can open up your SQL Server Management, and let me open the Management Studio as well. Okay. So these two applications, normally the SQL Server Configuration Manager is automatically installed when you install a MS SQL instance, but SQL Server Management Studio, SSMS, you definitely need to download again and install. So that's depending on the database type that you use. So if you are using MS SQL, this is the set of instructions. But if you are using MySQL, PostgreSQL, or Oracle, depending on the database type, you need to enable the access, because in our as per our architecture, we are trying to write data from outside that server into that server. So you have to enable remote connection, and also you have to enable the TCP IP traffic into it. So depending on the database type that you are using, you can configure this. So let's wait a minute till the SQL Server Management Studio comes up. And also, Tarido, I think if our viewers have any questions, they are free to ask from the Q&A, right?
Yes, correct. So any clarification or any question regarding this training, you can ask from click the Q&A button and send to us. We can provide better reply for that. I think we are connecting to Management Studio.
Yes, Taridu. And sometimes if you are a total beginner into this database and server management, certain points might be difficult for you to understand. We really apologize for that. But with the time that we have planned for today's training, you may need to have at least some intermediate knowledge in terms of this database and server management. Otherwise, some points might be a little difficult for you to understand. We apologize for that. But with the time limit, Taridu,
yes.
We are trying to incorporate as much as information into this training. So simply in the SQL Server Management Studio, you will see your SQL instance. We are using SQL Express. So I can see my instance. So I'm going to right click on my instance and go to the properties and wait for some time till the properties pops out.
And meantime, I think any clarification regarding this or more information you need, you can send a mail to our support at pick-dash email. So I think, yeah.
Thank you, Taridu. And once you have to open the properties, you have to go to connections and make sure this allow remote connection is ticked. That is the first thing you have to do. This is specific for Microsoft SQL. So if you are running any other software database, you have to adjust it according to your requirement. And also in the SQL Server Configuration Manager, you have to come to this SQL Server Network Configuration and click on this protocol for your instance and make sure that TCP IP is enabled. So once you have done these both settings, you need to restart your SQL instance. So simply you can go to SQL Server Services, and from there you can see your instance and simply right click and do a restart. So once you have done everything, we don't need to anymore connect to this server. So I'm going to disconnect from the remote server. So I'm going to emphasize again, today for the sake of easiness, we are using an AWS server. But if you can deploy this on your normal laptop, a normal computer, normal server at your office. Only requirement is this server should have a public static IP. Those ports should be allowed outside for connections to come into the server. And you can install the database also in the same machine or a different machine. If you are installing in a different machine, please make sure that you enable necessary security settings for database server to receive that data. So that is the only requirement. So to validate it, I can just simply go to my AWS console and I have my SQL Server Express instance, and I can see the public IP that been assigned for that instance. And I'm going to go there and I'm going to simply check. There are many tools in the internet. You can search simply open port checker. And there are many tools that you can online check any servers for their open ports. So simply I'm going to check here. The port I'm trying to check is 1433. And I'm going to check that. And simply it should be working. And Now, since we have a public IP for our database server and we have properly opened the port, we should be able to connect to it from anywhere in the internet. So simply now my computer that I'm using is connected to the internet. So I'm going to use one software called HiDSQL. It is a SQL client. You can use any client that you prefer. Even Microsoft SQL Data Management Studio also a client. You can use that even. So I'm going to use HiDSQL, which is kind of an easy tool. You can download it off in the internet free of charge. And I have already created the session here. I'm going to just update my IP here. My IP is 382.182.170, the public IP. And I can simply click on open and I will be connected to this database from my computer. So anywhere in the internet, you can do the same, you can connect. So I can see that I have already connected. So that part is now finished. Now, as a summary, whatever the database that you install, you make sure the remote connections are allowed. And if you want to enable the outside access, you can enable, but which I have enabled, and I have a public IP for my SQL server. And what I have done is from the outside, from my computer, I connected to that server. And now I can see the database, I can run queries, I can do certain things related to the database. Now let's go and look into the Central Access Control part, right, Tarun? So I'm going to connect to that instance. I'm going to get my password. So we are using AWS just as example, but if you have another cloud provider, you can use that as well. Doesn't matter. So you can deploy it in a cloud, deploy it in a normal computer or a virtualized computer in your office. So we have the flexibility that our software supports any sort of environment. As long as the initial server spec is met, we are able to deploy this kind of a system. So we are currently logging into the server that I just created for the installation of Central Access Control. Meanwhile, Tarun, we have a question from Mr. Ganesh. Do I need to connect my PC to internet? Yes, of course. If you are trying to install this software in your computer, you have to have an internet connection. Let me pull out this diagram again. This might be your computer where you are installing the software. You have to have internet connection and
static IP.
Static and public IP has to be there, and you have to enable the firewall rules and the port forwarding setup in your router. So let's see what is happening with our AWS server that which we picked for installation of the Central Access Control. What I'm going to do is simply copy all my, first I'm going to install Chrome, which is easy for me to install, download and install Central Access Control. Let me do that first. Okay. So I would like to know in the audience, is there anyone who have configured time attendance using our software? Like anyone using any sort of software, IVMS, Central, please mention in the chat what is the software that you have experienced, so we can get an idea what kind of audience that we have today for our training. And also this is a brand new installation, brand new server that I have configured. I have not done anything. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to download Central Access Control software from Hikvision website. Taridu, why don't you tell about, I think Central Access Control, now people know that IVMS is a free software, right? Yes. What about Central Access Control?
Yes, telling about Central Access Control, we have already covered all details in webinar, and also we will upload that details to YouTube. So you can watch it. In a summary of it. It is very useful for your small scale project because it is totally free for up to 4 devices and up to 50 people. So if your project can use, if device quantity is around 4 or people around 50, you can use this software as a access control software because this is server client architecture software. If you're using IVMS, you cannot log in multiple devices to that IVMS because it is only run in the installed PC. But if we take Central Access Control, we can connect in multiple computers through the network. I think now we are going to download Hikvision access control on web.
Yes, Daniel, I already went to I searched for Hikvision access control in Google and simply went to the Hikvision website, and from there I have a download link. I'm downloading the Hikvision access control as we speak now. And this installation is a breeze, very simple to do the installation. Minimum steps that you have to follow. And you can even install this software on an i3 computer with the 8 GB RAM. We strongly suggest you to refer to our website datasheet. So in the download page, you can also see the user manual datasheet. So if you I will simply open the datasheet and show you. In the datasheet, we have the required server specifications. So if you are deploying it on a on-premises server or a cloud server, we have mentioned what are the capabilities, like how many devices that it can handle, how many users it can handle, and what is the operating system that is supporting.
All details are here.
All the details are here.
Okay.
And you can also, we have another dedicated document for separate requirements and performance document. You can refer to that as well. In that, we have in detail guide Tarindu how to select the server for this kind of installation. So definitely, we suggest you to refer. Yes, we suggest you to check this part. Depending on the devices count, you might need to bump up your server spec to match the workload, because definitely when there are more devices, you have to do more work. So our download for Hikvision access control is finished. Now I'm going to simply run the setup. As I mentioned earlier, Tarindu, this setup is very easy. You just have to agree for the terms and conditions, then click on install, and everything will be done for you by the setup.
No more any complex setup, no?
Yes.
Okay.
We want to keep everything simple, especially in our software. And this, as you mentioned, we don't need to connect to the server PC to access the software. Once you have set up the software, for example, this is having a public IP, and when we port forward the necessary ports outside the server, you can even connect to the software from internet using just the browser. Just type in the IP address.
Okay. That means our viewers also can try after we set up this server in this IP in their PCs.
Exactly. So here, when we run the setup for the first time, it is asking for us it is giving us a fair warning, because this server that we are installing is having only 1 GB RAM, but it should have at least 8 GB RAM and the processor types which are supporting. But we are going to ignore this warning and agree to our terms and conditions and simply click on installation. So this installation will take 2-3 minutes, and that's it. That's it. You have to do to install the Hikvision access control software. If you want in detail guide about this software, what are the features, how to use each of the features, we have covered that in our YouTube channel. So I will, meanwhile this is installing, I will show them how to access it. You can simply go to YouTube, or you can simply go to hikdashportal.lk, which is our gateway for Sri Lankan customers. And in that, we have a separate link for official YouTube channel. You can simply click on that. And in the YouTube channel, you can do a search for Hikvision, and you can see Hikvision access control training that we have conducted in detail guide in local language and both Sinhala and I guess English, as well as if you prefer to use Hikvision. Also, we have done a dedicated training series. You can see our videos in our YouTube channel, and you can refer to that and get a clear idea about all the features of this software. Installation status is already completed. So when I click on finish, it will open the web client for me. There are a few settings as when you have installed Hikvision access control or Hikvision, is the similar methods are actually similar. You will be prompted to enter into the web client. So in the Hikvision access control, we have a web client, and you can see it is opening the local host IP address. And also it is opening another thing called service manager. So I want to give you a little introduction of the service manager, because this is following the microservices architecture. So we are having all the services as microservices, and we can see there are 3 microservices running in the service manager. And when we click on those, we can see the ports which are being used for the communications. For example, for the ISUP registration, they are using 7660. You can change it from here. If you don't prefer to use this kind of port, you can set any kind of port that you like, as long as they are not conflicted with other services in this server or in your network. And also you can set up, see there are another port for receiving the alarms, another port for receiving the local picture storage and getting the events. And also we have another service running for the client management. So this is how the clients communicate with the port 80 and 443. And as well as we have the streaming gateway, which can be used to live view your videos directly from, if you have a face recognition terminal which has a built-in camera, you can use that camera and monitor it on it remotely. So these are the ports being used. And I will get back to my browser here. Since I'm running Internet Explorer for the first time, it might be asking me some security settings to be set up. So I'm going to right. So it has opened me the interface. And now what I'm going to do is, when you are logging in for the first time, you have to set the root account password. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the root account password for this Central Access Control installation. Then click OK and I'll be logged in. And first thing you have to do is you have to enable WAN access, which is wide area network access to this server. So you can do that. This is the interface that you get when you log in for the first time. And if you want to know in detail about all these interfaces and features, we suggest you to check our video in Central Access Control. But I'm going to simply go into the menu and go to the system configuration here. And in here, I'm going to go to network to WAN access. And I'm going to enable access WAN option here, and it will show me bunch of ports that have been used for the communication. So at the same time, it is easy for me to set up the firewall as well for these ports. So I will go and set up firewall. When you search for firewall in Windows search, there has to be a result coming up with Windows firewall with advanced security. You can select that option here, and you will be presented with the Windows firewall settings page. So in that page, you can simply click on inbound rules, because we are going to set up an inbound rule so other especially devices can access this server to send the data. And click on new rule. And I'm going to select the type as port and click on next. Then I can define my ports. I'm going to define all the ports here separated by commas. So 80 is for the 80 and 4443 is for the client communication. 554 is for real-time streaming. 10,000 for video file streaming. 15,300 for data transfer. Especially the attendance data transfer is done through this. 6660 is for ISUP registration. 7332 is for ISUP alarm receiving, TCP. And also I'm going to enable 6123, which is for local picture storage, especially when you are using face recognition devices. It is capable of capturing the picture at the same time when the user is taking authentication. So what you can do is you can get those pictures into the server. So then you can see it from the server directly. So I'm going to click next, choose the allow the connection option, and select all the profiles here. Keep it selected and give the name. I'm going to give it the name as Central Access Control and click finish. So now firewall side rule is finished. Windows Firewall, it is enabled. If you have a router, if you are using this in your local office through a local on-premises server, you have to set up this port forwarding in the router as well. So that you have to keep in mind. Also here they are asking for IP address. That has to be your public IP, public static IP address that we previously mentioned. So since I'm using a AWS instance, I can check that real quick here in my AWS console. I can see my public IP address. So I'm going to simply copy it, come back to my server, RDP, and paste it here and click on save. Now you can simply verify this whether it is working or not. One way of doing is you can simply check the open port checker, enter that IP address. You can check any of the ports that you have allowed and check whether it is open. Simply when it is open means you can access it. So I'm going to open my Internet Explorer, which is more suitable for running this software, and I can simply go into the address. And if you are using Edge, you can also use that Internet Explorer mode. So I'm going to directly use it in Internet Explorer mode. So currently this is my computer. I'm accessing the server from the internet now. So I'm going to go back to my diagram. You can see here, we install the HIC central access control on this server and set up the firewall rules and set up the WAN access. Now any computer in the internet can connect to this server and manage it. That is the beauty of it. So if you have a computer nearby you, you can simply enter this IP address into that web browser, and you will also see this login screen. To manage the server here onwards, we don't need this remote connection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply I'm going to close it and disconnect from the remote desktop connection. So from here, I can now log into the server, and I will be presented with the same interface. Okay, now our next challenge is to add the device into the server. So let me give a rundown of the device setup. Now these devices, we have to configure certain settings. I will show you in a while. Once we configure those settings in these devices, and when we connect those devices to the internet, it will start communicating with the server, and we can add that device into the server. So that is what we are going to do now. So I have a one face recognition terminal with me plugged into my local network. If I simply run SADP or batch configuration tool, if you don't know about SADP and batch configuration tool, there are videos about this in our YouTube channel. You can check this. SADP is normally used to manage the devices in a local network. So as you can see, this device already activated, having a local IP of 192.168.1.235, and the gateway is set to 1.1, which is my router. So I know that device can connect to the internet. And I can also connect to this device. Most of the Hikvision time attendance devices now have a web interface. You can simply open your internet browser and type that IP address and log into that interface. So I'm going to log into my reader. You can also, if you have a touch screen in your machine, Fingerprint or the face recognition machine, you can also configure it from the screen menu. But I'm going to show you today the web page. So in the web page, you go to the configuration, network, and make sure that you have set up the IP version for gateway, your IP address, the DNS correctly. Then you come to the advanced, and under the platform access, you will see there's a platform access mode called ISUP, which is the protocol that we are going to use today for the connectivity, which is ISUP stands for Intelligent Secure Uplink Protocol. And I think Taranju has given a good explanation about the technical details of this. I simply enable it, use the version 5, and here I can enter the IP address of my server. So I'm going to copy this, simply enter my IP address. Do not put any other characters, only the IP address, and you have to put the ISUP registration port. If you remember, it was 7660, and you can give any name to your device. You can name your device according to your requirement. So one thing here I want to highlight, if you are a payroll company, if you have your own HRIS software or payroll software, you can deploy one server like this and give to all of your customers. Let's say as a multi-tenancy system. Let's see how we can do that. You can simply do that here. When you name in the device, you can name it by the customer code and branch code. Also, we are able to identify a device by a serial number. So what you can do is each customer you configure, you have only one server, HIC central access control. You add the devices to that server and give the device to the customer. And from the server, you are able to give a login to the customer, web login. And customer, when we give a login to the customer, we are able to give them proper access control. For example, if that customer should see information related to their company only, we have a fully fledged access control module in the system. If you want to know more details about this, you can check our detailed video about HIC central access control in our YouTube channel. Here you can simply create a role, and you can give them necessary permission and give a login to the customer as well. So once the customer login in, they can register their employees in the system and apply to the readers only related to them. So here this can be customer A and this can be customer B. So if you are a payroll company, you can also do like this, install one server for this entire operation, and give the access to the customers. So here we were at the device configuration side of it. So here, when you are giving the device ID, you can format it as per your requirement, having a customer code or a location code like that. So I'm going to simply give it as branch 1, and you have to set up a key or sort of password to identify and get authentication to your device. And I'm going to simply set this up and click save. Now on the device side, this is done. So this part, you can even do it in your office and deliver the device to the customer and get it fixed, because this is the only configuration that you have to do in the device side. Once this configuration is done, let's say now the device is installed, you can simply add that device to your central software. So you come to the resource management, and in here you can click on add, and you can select the protocol as ISUP and simply enter that device ID that which you gave, branch 1, the password that you set up, and the name you can give any name. Branch, I'm going to keep it as branch 1. So if it is a face recognition device, I said that we can use the picture storage to receive the authentication picture capturing pictures. Also, you can enable picture storage from here. That's it. That's all you have to do, and you can simply click on add. So it will take some time for device to become online here. Currently it is showing as offline. If I go back to the device from here, let me check here. If I refresh this page, you can see now it is as online in the register state. So definitely now this client the device should be recognized as an online device. So we have to give it 1 or 2 minutes, then it will be online. Tarindu, can we add your device as well?
Sure. Let's add device.
So Tarindu will also configure his device to this server address, so he can easily set up it in his device. So as per our initial architecture diagram here, one device is with me, one device is with Tarindu. Both are connected to the internet, and we are now going to connect that devices into the software directly through the internet. So let's refresh this one more time. Yes, yeah, now you can see it is online. And Tarindu, is it ready?
Yeah, it's ready.
Okay, I will add Tarindu's device as well. I have received his credentials. So I'm going to again select ISUP. Device ID is branch 2. I'm going to enter the password. I'm going to give the name as branch 2 and click on add. So give it some time to populate. And meanwhile, I can also add my employees. So I'm going to go to the person module, and I can simply create my person modules as per my requirement. So if you're having multiple customers, multiple branches, you can create as per your requirement. Now here, according to this diagram, we have customer A, customer B. So I'm going to create 2 groups here as customer A and customer B. Another group here as customer B. Under the all persons group, I'm going to create another group, which is customer B. So under customer A, I'm going to add myself as an employee. So I'm going to click on add, give ID, name, and when you are registering the biometric data, especially the face recognition, you need a face picture. You can directly register from the device. So you simply select the device from here, branch 1, and you can prompt. The device is telling me interface to capture the face. That's also possible, but I have a picture. I'm going to simply upload that picture into this system, and it will showing me certain controls, so I can set it up to match my face size and the guideline provided, and click save. And also I can also register my other credentials such as fingerprint and the card. So I'm going to simply show you how to register fingerprint from the remote device. Let's say now you are at the head office and you are going to register an employee who are at the customer A location. So you simply come to the configuration and select the fingerprint card and card reader. And from here you select the branch 1 and click on save and click on this plus icon.
Press your finger.
You can hear my device is saying, press your finger.
Press your finger again. Press your finger again. Fingerprint collected.
So you can see the device is given a prompt to place the fingerprint 3 times, and you can easily collect a fingerprint. So I have done that part, and under the customer B, I will add Tarindu as an employee. So I will click on add. And I have his face picture already with me. I'm going to upload it. And I'm going to save. Now I have added the employees, and I can simply synchronize these employees to the devices by going into the access level and creating two access levels, one for the customer A and customer B. So I'm going to create one for customer A and add the branch one into that and click on add. I'm going to create another level for customer B and add the branch 2 into that. Then I'm going to assign that access level to these persons. For example, for me, I'm going to assign customer A access level. Click assign. I'm not going to apply it now. I'm going to select apply later. And into the customer B, I'm going to assign customer B access level. So once I have finished assigning, I'm going to apply everything at once. And I'm going to select apply initial because this is the first time I'm applying to the device. But if you are, this should be done only at the first time. After that, you should not try to do it because it will try to push all the data from the beginning. Here, there's a small status bar and it is showing how the data is being applied to the device. So you can see currently data is being applied. So I hope that up to this point, you have a clear idea about what we have done. I will give a quick recap till the database is being applied. We created a new instance in AWS with a public static IP, installed central access control software there, set up firewall rules to enable the outside connections and also enable WAN access and simply connected to that server from our normal web browser. Then in the device side, I went to the settings. In the network settings, I made sure that devices can be connected to the internet. And also in the advanced network settings, I set up ISUP. I set up this server IP address. I set up my own username and device ID and a password. Then I came back to the device and simply added those two devices with the device ID and the passwords which we created. And on the SQL server, we simply install the SQL server, make sure that remote connections are available. And I use the SQL client just to see whether I can connect it to the database. So up to this point, we are done. Now we can monitor and see whether it is working. For first, I'm going to do go into the real-time monitoring and see whether these permissions are correctly applied and whether it's correctly working. We can simply check that here. I will first use my fingerprint to mark some data.
Authenticating failed. Authenticating failed.
Maybe I can try my face first.
Authenticating failed.
Maybe we need to reapply everything. Let me quickly check that. Also, once you have applied, if you face this kind of a problem in your system, you can simply, from the local network, you can simply log into the device. In the device, you have another tab in the top called user, and you can validate. Currently, it is not showing here, which means my device has not got any users into it. So I have done a small mistake. I have not added a customer myself as into the first device, so I'm going to do that now. And I'm going to apply it. Okay, so this should be fine. So you can make sure that you are applying the access levels correctly into the relevant person. So those can be synchronized with the device. So now the apply is done. So when I go back to the local IP, I can see that user already available in the local device. So in case if you want to troubleshoot also, you can do that troubleshoot from here. And also if you want to search certain attendance devices from the local device, you can connect to that IP and check. So now this should be working. So I'm going back to the real-time monitoring and trying to take my fingerprint authentication.
Thank you.
So the device says thank you, and you can see in the real-time monitoring, it is giving me the authentication. Also, I can use my face.
Thank you.
So Tarju, can you also do authentication with your face?
Sure, wait, I'll do it.
Yes. Now you can see Tarju is having a special device with a temperature screen in terminal. So you can see his temperature here at the same time. So now we have used ISUP protocol to connect to the management software in the internet. Without in the device side, we don't have anything, only the IP internet connection. So you don't have to worry about setting up dynamic DNS, setting up static IP, or using a VPN. So everything can be done, and this data is encrypted, and you don't have to worry about the data security. So up to this part is done. Now what we have to do is we have to connect the database transfer to the SQL server. So now that is what we are going to do. So in order to do that, so I'm going to open my connection. Using this client, I'm connected to the database server, and I have a simple query to create a database and a table. So here, first I'm going to create a table called HCP. In the HCP, I'm going to create a table called attendance, which have these fields. So if you look at these fields, we have employee ID, date, time, certain data. So how do we find these data? It is easy. So I will go back to the configuration page in the Hikvision Central Access Control web client. I go to system configuration. In here, you have the third-party integration tab. You go to data interchange, and from here you enable it. Then resource for card swiping. Here you have to make sure that you add all the devices that you want the data to be transferred to the database. So here, sometimes you might be using certain access control devices for access control purpose. So you can only select the devices you want the attendance here. Then also certain cases, if the authentication request is failed, it will take as a failed request. But if you don't need those records for your payroll, you simply can omit it by clicking on this tick box. And next you select the type. So we have database synchronization and access record dump. So if you want to have a CSV file or a text file, you can choose the access record dump. But today we are going to check about database synchronization. Then these interfaces should be familiar to you. I think Varun explained it in his slides. So we can select the database type. So today we are going to test with SQL Server. Then simply you have to enter the other details. So we have to enter the server IP address. So let me quickly copy the server IP address from my AWS console. So this is the server IP address for the SQL Server. Come back to my configuration page and enter it. Database name is HCP, username and password. Once you set it up, you can click on this test connection button and it will take some time and it will check the connection with the database. So I have certain issue with connecting. Let me double check it. I have not yet created the database. So I have to first run this query and make sure that database is there. So I'm going to do that now. So I'm going to run the query and make sure my database is there. So now currently here it is not showing. So I can disconnect this connection and reconnect it. Give it a moment and you can see the HCP is here. And under that, you have the database table as well. So the attendance table is here. You can see all the fields here. So now I'm going to test my connection. Now it should be working. Yes, now it says operation complete. Now to check out the fields that you want to transfer, you can see all the fields here. Employee ID, access date and time, access date, access time. So these 4 fields are mandatory. So when you are creating your database, I will show that query again. When you are creating this database, these first 4 fields are mandatory. Then other fields you are optional. You can either define or not. So there are certain fields such as authentication result, authentication type. Authentication result means whether it's success or failed. Authentication type means whether it's a card-based authentication, face or fingerprint. You can have the device name, device serial number, the reader name, person group, card number, the direction, whether it's entry or exit, if you define it in the system. Temperature, whether the device is capable of detecting temperature, you will have the temperature reading as well. Then the temperature status, whether it's over temperature or below temperature, that part. And also whether if it is a face recognition device, we are capable of giving you update whether it's wearing a mask or not, and the attendance status. So let me go back to the configuration page of the data interchange, and here I will enter the table name, which is attendance. Then I start mapping these fields into my real database field. Before that, let me just run a query here. I'm going to select all from the attendance table and just run this query. And as you can see, that table is empty. We don't have any data in it. So just to make sure that there's no data at the start. So I'm going to simply map the fields in my SQL table into this interface. And you don't have to configure all the fields, only the required fields, but keep in mind, first 4 fields are mandatory. You have to configure those whether you like it or not. But other fields, you can keep it as blank if you don't want to transfer data, or if your table doesn't have that kind of a field in the table structure. So other than that, I'm going to enter everything else, because in my table I have created all these fields just to show you the functionality. Card number, direction, temperature, then the temperature status. Then we have whether wearing a mask or not, the mask status and the attendance status. So here also in the right side, you have another small configuration options, which are you can change the date and time format. We have certain formats, again, date format and the time format. And when the authentication result is success or false, you can select which type of string that you want to pass to the database. Also here, in the direction, you can also type your own string, own type of string, and also temperature, you can also set up your own type of strings. Whether the temperature is normal or abnormal or unknown means the device is not capable of handling temperature screening. And whether they are wearing a mask or not, so I click mask, no mask, or unknown. So you can customize this as per your requirement. I'm just entering whatever I prefer is okay, but if you have different text that you want to push to the database, you can definitely set it here. Up to 255 characters are allowed in this fields. So I have simply configured it. I'm going to save it. Now things should be okay. Now you can see this is showing as sending data. At any time, you can come to this interface and see what is the issue. And if there are any errors, you can see that as well. And if you want to synchronize, there's a button to synchronize as well. Now, let's go back to the database and just run the query again here, just to make sure that everything is there, no data, right? Now I'm going to open up my Central Access Control web client again, and I'm going to go to Access Control Real-Time Monitoring. Now this time I'm going to use my fingerprint again.
Thank you.
You can see record is here. I'm going to open my database and run the query. You can see the record has appeared. So it is almost real time. When the user is taking the authentication, you can get the data real time to your database. It is showing you the correct time, the auth result, whether the fingerprint or face or card or used to take the authentication, branch name, the device name, device number, reader name, person group, and card number, direction. And I don't have a device capable of handling temperature detection. So, and the mask is shown as empty because I use the fingerprint. So I'm going to show you now. I'm going to use my face to do the authentication, and I'm going to show you how to get that into database.
Thank you.
So I'm not wearing a mask. So you can see it captured the picture. I'm going to go back to database and run this query again. This time you can see second one also appeared. This one is face, and here no mask. I'm not wearing a mask. How easily we can configure everything, and in the database, how we can receive those events almost real time. So with that, I think we have covered pretty much what we have planned in our practical session. So we had 2 devices and we had a AWS server. Doesn't have to be AWS cloud, or you can use any sort of cloud for this. And we have 2 servers in the cloud, one for the SQL server, one for our Central Access Control software installation. So this SQL server also, you don't have to have a separate server. If you don't have much hardware, you can install that also inside this computer, this server. So it doesn't have to be cloud even. If you want to test this out, you can simply install it in your computer as well, or a laptop as well, or even if you have a local server, you can do that. Only requirement is your router should have a public static IP, and you should have the firewall and the port forwarding setup so that devices can connect to the router, connect to the server over the internet. We use a protocol called ISUP to connect to the internet. We set up those settings in the device web page. We set up the IP address, server IP address, and the device ID and the password, and then use it to add that device to the server. So that is one way of doing it. So if you have direct access, or if you are running this on a local network or VPN, you can even use the local IP and directly add to the software. That doesn't matter. You don't have to necessarily use ISUP. You can use any other mechanism as well. And then we set up the SQL server. In the SQL server, depending on the database type, we supported 4 types: MS SQL, MySQL, Oracle, and Postgre. You have to set up the security rule to accept the data from outside, and proper users should be created. So we are using the system user for this demo, but you can create a separate user if you want, with only permission to write to that attendance table. So that is also possible. It is good for the security. And once everything is done, we added the devices to the management software. From there, we set up how the data interchange should send the data to the SQL database table that we created. And from there, the payroll system can pick the data and do the processing.
Thank you everyone.
Thank you.
Again, bye.
Thank you, team.